Coming off 6 regular season wins in a row to close out the season, the Baylor Bears have a ton of momentum heading into this season. Let's do a college football preview for them. I'm going to talk about the stars of the team, a few storylines, losses, and additions to the rosters, as well as at the end, an X Factor game on the schedule and a record prediction going game by game, wins and losses. Here we go, talking about the stars. Everybody from last year that was standing out to me came back. Sawyer Robertson took over the starting job for Daquan Finn in game number 2 or 3, I believe, and he shined, if I do say so. 3,000 yards, 28 touchdowns. He's a rhythmic thrower, and he is a beautiful thrower of the football. And then to pair with him in the backfield, Bryson Washington, running back, 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns in his redshirt freshman season. Did a great job outside the tackles. This Baylor team is extremely dynamic in the skill position group. And then last but certainly not least, Josh Cameron, wide receiver, 700 yards, 10 touchdowns last year. He was Robertson's #1 target in the end zone. This guy is going to explode onto the scene as far as star wide receivers in college football. I think 754 yards scratches the surface at what his potential can be. We'll see what Baylor can draw up this upcoming season. Maybe they use him more as like a standing out decoy in terms of like star power. When I think about that, I think about Calvin Ridley's junior season. I mean, he could have had 1,800 yards, but he ended up being the guy who got all of the attention. And maybe that's Josh Cameron this year. But overall, I am unbelievably happy with where this Baylor offense is at. And then defensively, not the best season in the world, but 2 inside linebackers that to me just scream football guys. I'm talking about hat on a hat, get to the football and fly. 2 guys, Keaton Thomas, returner from last year, 114 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, and then a transfer coming in from FIU, Travion Barnes, once again, inside linebacker. Baylor runs a 3-4, so they've got 2 inside linebackers. Another guy just gets to the ball, man. He does an excellent job at FIU, 129 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss. Great season from him. I think he will be able to step into this role and flourish. So, storyline number 1 that I want to talk about, Dave Aranda got his rebound. Like in year 4 or 5, I believe, last year, he was 2-4 coming off a loss to Iowa State. And they had a 12-2 season followed by a 3-9 season and then I think a 6-7 year. So year 3 removed from a Big 12 conference title. And it looked like Dave Aranda's job was out the window. But Baylor rallied around their coach. Their offense got clicking. They won the last 6 games in a row, all in Big 12 conference play, averaging 41 points per game. And then in the bowl game versus LSU, that LSU team was far outclassing what Baylor has talent-wise, and they still were able to put up 31 points against them. They did end up losing. I think what really comes to mind here for this Baylor team is, can they continue this continuity and consistency? In the day and age of where college football is at, that is key, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But let's talk about the losses and additions to this roster first up. Number 1, not a lot of additions, but not a ton of loss in terms of production value. 2 guys that I want to talk about that ended up leaving this roster for various reasons. Matt Jones, linebacker, I think he had to graduate. He's an undrafted free agent to the Raiders, but last year, the second leading tackler, 104 tackles, 4 sacks, 6 pass deflections. Just a guy that can do it all in terms of Big 12 defense. I'm talking about a guy who's not scared to drop back in coverage, rush the passer, stop the run. That is one of their key guys from last season that they will be without. And then secondly, Corey Gordon Jr., a safety going to Louisville. Not a lot of people are talking about this transfer because, it's not the splash move like a John Mateer to Oklahoma, but this was an important piece for Baylor last year. He had 34 tackles, 3 interceptions, I believe 2 or 3 pass deflections as well. Kind of a box specialist, somebody that can do it all, stop the run, rush the passer, very similar to Matt Jones here. 2 guys that are very dynamic, end up leaving this defense. And then additions-wise, I've already talked about him, Travion Barnes. He's going to have to fill the hole that Matt Jones left on this defense. I personally think he is not only going to be able to do that, but take it a step further and make this Baylor Bears defense even better than it was. Moving on now to a couple more storylines that I want to talk about before we get into our record prediction. Number one, I already mentioned it a little bit, continuity and consistency. This roster has a ton of returning production. And in this day and era, the NIL transfer portal era, it is unbelievably crucial to success to have continuity and consistency. I have mentioned it in video after video of these college football previews. The teams that I'm low on have a ton of transfers. The teams that I'm high on have a ton of returning talent. And especially on the offensive side of the football, with your leading passer, your leading rusher, your leading receiver, your offensive coordinator returning, all of those things play such an important role into how next year's offense is going to perform. I think they're all going to do great. Sawyer Robertson got the experience that he needed. Bryson Washington is a young budding star in the backfield. Josh Cameron, like I said, I think he is just now getting to the peak of his powers. There's tons to like about this Baylor team. Now, next thing I want to talk about is back in 2021, when Baylor won the Big 12, they barely missed the college football playoff. A loss to TCU that year did them in my opinion. I believe TCU was unranked at the time. I think Baylor was one of the best teams in college football that year, but not necessarily just because of their offense. Dave Aranda had the Baylor Bears defense at a top 15 scoring level. They were only allowing 19 points per game. They held 8 opponents to 20 points or less, including dominant fashion in the Big 12 championship game and their bowl game versus Ole Miss. I think if Baylor they don't have to get back to a top 15 scoring defense, but I think if they could get to top 30, this team is absolutely going to win the Big 12. And watch out, ladies and gentlemen, they could compete in a college football playoff game against a Big 10 or an SEC team like Arizona State did last year with Texas. We saw Texas become one of the best teams in college football, and Arizona State, who nobody saw coming, went toe-to-toe with them. I think a lot of people are kind of high on Baylor. I am as well. I just think this team has a ton to prove, and as the season goes on, they can absolutely do that. There's ample opportunity. Speaking of that, let's talk about their X Factor game. To me, it is not Auburn, although I think Auburn's X Factor game for me that I did a preview for previously was Baylor, because they need a tone setter for the season. I don't necessarily think Baylor needs that. I think they need to pull off an upset victory on the road at SMU. If they can do that versus a team that was in the college football playoffs last year, a team that is not returning a ton of their offensive production or defense, a team that people are still kind of high on to be an ACC championship contender, if you can get a major win there, wow, that means a ton later in the season when it comes to who's going to get a college football playoff bid. I think Baylor potentially could be a at-will bid, not a stand-in bid for winning the Big 12. I think if they lose the Big 12 championship game, if they get there, could get in if they beat a team like SMU. Now, of course, this is an in-Texas rivalry. This is something that, you can use as recruiting. I think there's a lot of reasons as to why SMU is a more important game than Auburn. So that's why I've got this game as the X factor. But let's hop into the record prediction and see where we go from there. To start the season, Auburn at home. I think Auburn is putting an unbelievable amount of pressure on this game versus Baylor. I do think that their coaching staff is fighting for their jobs. They're unbelievably desperate, and this game is of the utmost importance. I also think Baylor is treating this game very seriously, but I love Auburn's talent this year. I think they're one of the most underrated teams in college football. I'm going to give them the win on the road versus Baylor to start the season, but Dave Aranda gets his rebound the very next week at SMU. I think the Bears can pull off an upset win there. Now, in my eyes, it won't be an upset because I think Baylor is outright the better team, but I'm sure that the odds makers out there will give SMU the line edge. That being said, that's a victory. Home for Samford, FCS school, not much to talk about there. Another win, 2-1, heading into Arizona State, another college football playoff team with a quarterback in Sam Leavitt that is maybe competing for a Heisman. However, I do think that Baylor's continuity and consistency in the skill group is of the utmost importance when talking about this game. Home field advantage, also very important. That's why I think they can win versus Arizona State. This is going to be a shootout. I don't think Dave Aranda's defense is going to, quote unquote, show out for this game. I am a huge believer in what the program has to offer right now, whereas Arizona State, maybe they're looking for a new identity now that Cam Scatabo is gone. So, win there for Baylor, 3-1 at Oklahoma State. I've said it in a few other videos, including my Oklahoma State preview. This is one of the worst teams that Mike Gundy has ever fielded. They have tons of transfers coming in. None of them are marquee. I think this is a loss for Oklahoma State, even though they're at home. That's a victory for Baylor there. So 4-1 heading into Kansas State at home. That is probably the third, maybe fourth most important game on the schedule, and it's still a big one. Avery Johnson is a Heisman contender in my eyes. I think that Sawyer Robertson is pretty much overlooked in the Big 12 when you talk about quarterbacks and how good they are. I've got my faith in Baylor at home in this game. I think the stadium is going to be rocking. Give me the Bears. Sick them on that game. 5-1 heading into at TCU. Now, the Big 12 this season, to me, seems like the old SEC where everybody just kind of beats up on each other. You know, Baylor beats Kansas State. Kansas State beats TCU. TCU beats Baylor. Those kind of cycles. And because this game is at home for TCU, I love Josh Hoover. I love Sonny Dykes. I think that they have a great system over there. I'm going to give the Horned Frogs the victory. Even though Baylor is on a hot streak, they've got to come to an end somehow. All of these teams, they're not dominant, in my opinion. They're all extremely good. Nobody in this conference is an Alabama or an Ohio State or a Michigan. They don't have stand-all talent that just trumps over everyone. I think they're all pretty even in terms of talent. So home field advantage means a lot in some of these big marquee games. Next up, at Cincinnati, that's not one of those teams that I think has the talent to compete for the Big 12. I'm going to give Baylor the victory there, although I do think that will be a tough one. Cincinnati so far has been a sneaky team over the last 3 or 4 seasons, even with the departure of their coach Luke Fickell to Wisconsin. That's going to be a game where you think that Baylor's going to walk in and just take the cake, but it could be upset alert potential. Next up, UCF at home, one of the worst rosters in the Power Four. I do not think that they're going to be able to compete, especially with Baylor being at home for this one. Next up, Utah. If this game was at Utah, I would think differently. Home field advantage to me in the Big 12 right now means a lot. These teams are pretty evenly matched. It could go either way. If it was on a neutral site, I think I would lean Utah like 51 to 49%, but because it's at home for Baylor, I think it's like a 53-54% chance that they win that game. Next up, at Arizona. Once again, lots of momentum here. Arizona, I think, is reeling from their good season 2 years ago. They lost their head coach, who I don't think that they've replaced. They lost a ton of talent on defense. And, of course, losing Tet McMillan in the draft last year, that's a massive piece of their offensive production. I don't think that they're going to be able to recoup from that, even though it's at the end of the season. That's a win for Baylor. And then last but not least, Houston at home. I don't think Houston is ready to compete. They had a very disappointing season last year. The Big 12 has just kind of been a little too hard for them to shine in. So I think that's another victory for Baylor. So to recap, 10-2, but only one conference loss. They go 8-1 in conference games. So that to me is a Big 12 championship bid. And quite honestly, I think with their schedule, beating teams like SMU, Kansas State, Arizona State, that is a playoff bid, regardless of whether or not they win the Big 12 championship game. Their only 2 losses coming to TCU, who I think is a really good team, and Auburn, which once again, I think could be a 7 or 8 win SEC team. Very strong record here for Baylor. I'm extremely high on them right now. I guess we'll see come week 1 how they're ready to play out. Maybe they even pull off the victory versus Auburn and kind of swap those wins and losses. Maybe beat Auburn but lose to SMU. Regardless, that's where I have them right now. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, everyone. I love doing these videos, and I love that you guys enjoy watching them. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.